You know what? I've destroyed the lives of 13 people. He said this while pouring me tea. His hand was steady, the tea tracing a perfect arc as it fell into the white porcelain cup without spilling a single drop. Outside, rain pounded against the bookstore windows and his profile in the dim light resembled a marble statue. Cold, hard, perfect, and lifeless. I should have screamed. I should have called the police. I should have run out the door. But instead, I simply took the teacup and gently blew on the steam rising from it. Jasmine tea, I said. You remembered. He finally looked up at me, and something shattered in those gray eyes. Mira, his voice was hoarse. Why don't you run? Because. I set down the teacup and took hold of his cold hands. You're the 14th person, Alexei, the one you've always wanted to destroy. To be honest, the first moment I saw Alexei Volkov, I knew he wasn't there to buy books. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was alone in the bookstore. Autumn sunlight lazily spilled across the old wooden floor, and the air carried the mixed scent of paper and dust. I was standing on a ladder organizing the poetry section. This shop was left to me by my father. It had been open for 30 years, and regular customers knew that Tuesday afternoons were the quietest. The doorbell rang. I turned around and saw him walk in. 6'3", a deep gray tailored coat with tailoring so perfect, it was almost severe. His black hair was combed without a strand out of place, high cheekbones, and a jawline sharp enough to cut through air. But what was most striking were his eyes, cold gray, like frozen Siberian lakes. He surveyed the entire bookstore, his gaze lingering in each corner for no more than 2 seconds, as if conducting some kind of assessment. No security cameras, one exit, windows that could be broken. I translated his gaze in my mind. Need any help? I asked from the ladder, trying to keep my voice natural. His gaze shifted to me and stayed for a full 5 seconds. I felt like I had been scanned. Mirandy, he said, his voice deep with a faint Slavic accent. Art books. Art section. I pointed. 3rd row middle. He walked over, his footsteps silent. I noticed his shoes, Italian handmade, at least $3,000. His coat pocket bulged slightly, the shape regular, like it held a phone or something else. There was a scar on the ring finger of his left hand, very faint, but particularly noticeable against his pale skin. 10 minutes later, he sat down in the reading area by the window with the art book. Then he stayed for 4 hours. During that time, he didn't say a word, didn't use the restroom once, barely even changed his posture. I had never seen anyone look at an art book with such focus. That kind of focus didn't seem like appreciating art. It was more like searching for some answer. At 6 in the afternoon, when I was preparing to close, he finally stood up. Will you be open tomorrow? He asked. Every day, I said, except Sundays. He nodded, put the art book back in its place, turned and left. The doorbell rang again, and he disappeared into the street's twilight. I walked to where he had been sitting and touched the back of the chair. It was still warm. That night, I had a strange dream. I dreamed those gray eyes became a lake surface. I stood on the shore and heard someone playing piano at the bottom of the lake. He came again the next day, still at 2:30 in the afternoon, still in that deep gray coat, still with that Mirandy art book. This time he stopped in front of me for a moment. Do you have tea? Yes. Black tea, green tea, jasmine tea. Jasmine tea, he interrupted. No sugar. I made him tea, and when I brought it over, he was staring at a painting, several bottles, a gray-blue background, quiet as a secret. Why do you like Mirandy? I couldn't help asking. He took the teacup and was silent for a long time. No conflict. What? There is no conflict in his paintings, he said, his gaze still on the art book. No drama, no story, no metaphor, just bottles, colors, light, existence itself. I sat down across from him. So you like quiet things? I need, he corrected, looking up at me for the first time. Quiet things. Those eyes were even more striking up close, not because of coldness, but because of restraint, like a volcano about to erupt that had sealed itself with millennia of ice. I'm Mira, I said, Mira Chen. Alexei, he said, then paused as if considering whether to continue. Alexei Volkov. That surname made my heart tighten. Volkov in Russian, it means wolf. Over the next month, he came every day. Same time, same spot, same art book, same tea. I started making the tea before he arrived and placing it on his table. He never said thank you, but he would nod each time, a gesture so small it was almost imperceptible. I began noticing more details. He never took off his coat, even when the bookstore was warm. His watch was expensive, but the face had subtle scratches, not from wear, more like from intense activity. The way he read the art book was peculiar, not flipping through from beginning to end, but repeatedly looking at certain pages, as if searching for some answer. In the third week, he started talking. "Why did you open a bookstore?" "I was wiping down a bookshelf. My father's shop after he passed away. I took over." "Do you like it?" "Books. Yes. The business. So. I smiled. "But it is better than going back to being an architect." "Architect." His interest was piqued, and his gaze finally showed some warmth. "My major." I sat down. "I studied for 5 years in college, then discovered I hated that industry. Everyone talks about innovation, but in the end they all build the same glass boxes. So the bookstore is different. Books are honest," I said. "Even fictional stories honestly display the author's inner world. Architecture can lie, using gorgeous appearances to hide inferior structure, but books don't." Alexei looked at me for a long time. "What can you read? What do you mean?" "From me," he set down his teacup. "What do you read?" I hesitated. This was a dangerous question, but there was a nearly desperate expectation in his eyes. "Loneliness," I said softly, "and you don't want to be lonely anymore." His fingers stopped on the rim of the cup. Outside it began to rain. "I handle complex problems." After a long pause, he began. "I help people solve troubles they can't solve themselves." "What kind of troubles?" "The kind you wouldn't want to know about." He looked toward the window. "Involving money, power, betrayal, sometimes involving." He paused. "Permanent solutions." My heartbeat skipped. "You mean, I don't harm innocent people?" He turned back to look at me, his gaze sharp. "Only those who deserve consequences. But that doesn't mean my hands are clean." Rain pounded against the windows, the sound growing louder. I should have been afraid, should have asked him to leave, should have called the police. But I just poured him more tea. "Then why do you come here?" "Because." He picked up the cup, steam blurring his face. "This is the only place where no one wants to cause me trouble." On the last day of November, everything changed. That night at 10, I had just locked the shop door, preparing to go home. The street was very quiet, streetlights stretched my shadow long. I was rummaging through my bag for car keys when I suddenly heard footsteps. 3 men emerged from the alley across the street. The leader wore a leather jacket, had a scar above his right eyebrow, and smiled unpleasantly. "Miss Mira Chen." My fingers tightened around the keys. "Can I help you?" "Of course you can." He approached, the other 2 spreading out to block my retreat. "The street's been pretty unsafe lately, you know. Several shops got vandalized. What a shame." "So protection is needed." He pulled out a business card. "Our boss says $3,000 a month. Buy some peace of mind. Not expensive, right?" I looked at that business card. Dmitry Sokolov, the new force in the East District. I had heard of him from out of town, very aggressive, very crazy. What if I refuse? Scarface smiled. "Then it is hard to say. Glass is expensive. Books are easily damaged, and of course," he stepped forward, "you could easily get hurt. She doesn't need protection." Alexei's voice came from the darkness, like an ice blade cutting through air. He came from the street corner, 2 people following behind him. Suits, cold eyes, hands in pockets. Streetlights stretched their shadows like giants. Scarface's smile froze. "Mr. Volkov, did Dmitri send you?" Alexei walked to my side, his tone terrifyingly calm. "We didn't know this was your territory." "Now you know," Alexei interrupted. "Go back and tell Dmitri, the 5th district is mine. If he has a problem." He took a step forward. The 3 men immediately stepped back. "Tell him to come talk to me himself. Now get lost." They left almost like they were fleeing. The street became quiet again. I leaned against the door, my legs trembling. "Are you all right?" Alexei turned to me, worry appearing in his eyes for the first time. I took a deep breath. "Who exactly are you?" He was silent, moonlight casting shadows on his face. "Someone you'd be better off staying away from. You just protected me. That was a mistake," he said, a weariness I had never heard in his voice. "I shouldn't have gotten you involved. I thought I could keep 2 worlds separate, the world that needs me, and this one where I want to be someone else, but they can never be separated." "Alexei, everything I touch eventually gets destroyed, Mira." He looked at the bookstore window where the lights were still on. "It is the pattern. You should stay away from me." "Then why do you still come?" I stood up straight. "If you really believe this, why didn't you leave on the first day?" He looked at me, complex emotions in his eyes, longing, fear, and something almost desperate. "Because I can't," he said softly. "You're the first person I've met who isn't afraid of me. Not because you're brave, but because you saw." He paused. Something else. The rain started again. "Will you come tomorrow?" I asked. He looked at me for a long time, then nodded. But the next day he didn't come, not the third day or the fourth day, a whole week. Like a fool, I made jasmine tea every day, placed it at his spot, then watched the tea slowly grow cold. On the 8th day, I finally couldn't stand it. I searched for his name. The first result made my blood freeze. The article had a blurry photo, obviously taken secretly, showing him in a black suit, walking out of a building, his expression cold as a mask. The content mentioned Volkov, 32 years old, came to New York from Moscow 3 years ago, took over all gray business in the East District. Unlike other forces, Volkov was known for coldness and efficiency. Allegedly, he never acted personally, but his orders were ultimate judgments. I closed the webpage, my hands trembling. But I thought again of those eyes looking at the Morandi art book. I thought of his voice when he said, "I need quiet." I thought of that subtle gesture when he nodded in thanks. On the 9th evening, I made a decision. I found Volkov's office address in the East District, the top floor of an old industrial building. I took a cab there, standing below the building. I almost changed my mind. 2 bodyguards stood at the door. "I'm looking for Alexei Volkov," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. They exchanged glances. "Who are you?" "Tell him the bookstore owner is here." 5 minutes later, I was brought up in the elevator. The elevator doors opened to a huge open space. Floor to ceiling windows, city lights, black leather sofas, and more than 20 men in suits, all staring at me. Alexei stood by the window, his back to the door. "Everyone out," he said. The room emptied instantly. Only the 2 of us remained. He turned around, his face paler than usual. "You shouldn't have come here. You shouldn't have disappeared." I walked over. A whole week, Alexei, disappearing without a word. "It is better this way." "Better for whom?" My voice rose. "For me. You think I'll be afraid because I know who you are. You should be afraid," he finally exploded, coming over and grabbing my shoulders. "Do you know what I've done? Do you know how many people have disappeared because of a word from me? Then why did you come to the bookstore?" I demanded. "Why did you sit there every day looking at art books? Why drink jasmine tea? Why?" "Because I wanted to be someone else," he shouted, then released me, turned away, hands in his hair. "Because there, in front of you, I could pretend I was just an ordinary person who likes Morandi. I could pretend my hands weren't stained with sin. I could pretend I could still be saved." His voice broke. "But I can't be saved, Mira. I did the first unforgivable thing when I was 15, avenging my father, and after that, there was no going back." I walked to his side and gently took his hand. His hand was trembling. "You know," I said softly. "I looked up Morandi's story." He looked up at me. He spent his whole life painting the same things, bottles, jars, simple shapes. Critics said he was escaping reality, said his paintings were too monotonous. I gripped his hand tighter, but he said he was searching for the essence of things, removing everything superfluous, leaving only existence itself. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying," I looked into his eyes, "maybe you've been doing the same thing, removing those identities, that past, that sin, leaving only the essence, and that essence." I placed his hand on my heart, is someone who wants quiet, wants to be seen, wants to be accepted. His eyes reddened. "I don't deserve it," he said hoarsely. "Let me decide that," I said. "I'm not running, Alexei, so stop pretending you want me to." He looked at me like I was a miracle. Then he kissed me, kissing desperately, tenderly, like he wanted to pour all his unspoken words into it. Outside the window, the city lights flickered in the night, like witnessing this impossible moment. 2 weeks later, one evening, everything exploded again. I was closing the bookstore. Alexei said he would come pick me up for dinner. He had recently started trying normal dating, watching movies, taking walks, even went to a museum once. Although he seemed like he was executing a mission the whole time, I could see he was trying. At 9 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang, but it wasn't Alexei who came in. It was Dmitry Sokolov himself. He was more terrifying than in photos, bald, tattoos crawling up his neck, eyes full of madness. Behind him were 7 or 8 people, all carrying baseball bats. "Mira Chen," Dmitry grinned, "finally meeting you." I slowly backed away, my hand reaching for the emergency button under the counter. "What do you want?" "Originally just wanted to collect some protection money." He walked in, surveying the bookstore. But that Volkov guy had to interfere now. He picked up a book and casually tore out a page. "I want to teach him a lesson. Alexei will make you regret this." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Will he?" Dmitri laughed louder. Volkov has already lost, little girl. My people will take out his 3 locations tonight. His core members have been bought by me. By the time he finds out, he snapped his fingers. Game over. He walked up to me. But before that, I want to make sure he hurts enough. He grabbed my wrist. I screamed, struggled, but his strength was too great. The others started smashing things. Bookshelves toppled, glass shattered. Books my father had collected for 30 years were trampled underfoot. Stop, I shouted, tears streaming down. Please, stop. Dmitri laughed as he shoved me toward the bookshelf, my back hitting it hard, begging me now, too late. He raised the baseball bat. Then the window exploded. A figure tumbled in from outside, moving as fast as a ghost. Alexei. He was soaked, it was raining outside, and his eyes held an anger I had never seen. Touch her, and you're finished. His voice was as low as a beast's. Dmitri turned, baseball bat pointing at him. Volkov, perfect timing. Let you see your little girlfriend. His words didn't finish. Alexei's movements were so fast I barely saw them. He grabbed the bat, kneed Dmitri in the abdomen, then with an over-the-shoulder throw sent the 200-pound man crashing to the ground. The whole process took less than 3 seconds. The others rushed forward. What happened next was like a movie. Alexei moved like a dancer, every movement precise and powerful. He seized a baseball bat, smashed it toward the first person's knee. I heard the sound of bones cracking. Turning, he elbowed the second person in the temple. 2 minutes later, all 7 people lay on the ground, moaning. Alexei walked toward Dmitri, stepping on his chest. I gave you a chance. You'll regret, Dmitri shouted in pain. The police will. I won't take your life, Alexei said, his tone terrifyingly calm. Because she is here, but listen clearly, he bent down. If you appear on this street again, I'll make you regret being born. Now get lost. He lifted his foot. Dmitri scrambled away, the others following in flight. The bookstore was in ruins. Alexei turned to me, the fierceness from moments ago vanished instantly, only concern in his eyes. Are you hurt? I shook my head, but my legs gave out and I collapsed to the floor. He came over and held me. I'm sorry, he said, his voice trembling. I'm sorry, I came too late. You came. I grabbed his soaked coat. You came. He held me tighter. Dmitri was right. He attacked my 3 locations tonight. There is a traitor inside. He took a deep breath. I might have to leave for a while. What? I looked up. Things got complicated. He stroked my face. I need to deal with this betrayal, need to re-establish order. It might take a few months, and it is dangerous. Then I'll go with you. No, he said firmly. This is exactly why I need to protect you. Mira, listen to me. He gripped my shoulders. It is going to get messy. There will be people who want to get to me, who want to use you to threaten me. You stay here, I'll arrange the best protection. I don't want protection. My voice rose. I want you. You will have me. He kissed my forehead. I promise. When everything's over, I'll come back. Then we'll go to Vienna, to my mother's house, start over. But now, police sirens sounded outside. Now you have to go. He stood up, pulling me with him. My people will handle this. You go home, lock the door. Within 3 days, someone will contact you to arrange protection. Alexei. He kissed me again, this time desperately, deeply, like a farewell. Trust me. Then he left through the back door, disappearing into the rainy night. The next 2 months were hell. Alexei's protection was thorough, 2 bodyguards watching 24 hours, rotating shifts regularly. But there was no news from Alexei, no phone calls, no messages, nothing. I tried searching for him, but online there were only increasingly disturbing reports. East District gang warfare escalating, multiple explosions, Volkov's locations attacked, casualties unknown, police intervening in the investigation, multiple arrests. Each news item was like a knife stabbing my heart. In the 3rd week, I started having nightmares, dreaming he had been hurt, dreaming he had been betrayed, dreaming I would never see him again. During the day, I forced myself to keep the shop open. At night, I cried into my pillow. In the 6th week, a text came from an unknown number. He is still alive. He'll come back. No signature, but I knew it was from his people. That text became my only hope. In the 8th week Christmas, a package appeared at the bookstore door. After the bodyguard checked it, he handed it to me. Inside was a book. A Morandi art book, Vienna edition, out of print. On the title page was a line of handwriting. Wait for me. Keep making TA. I hugged the book and cried all night. In the 9th week, January 1st. The doorbell rang at 2 in the morning. I jolted awake from the sofa. I had gotten used to sleeping downstairs, ready for his return at any moment. Through the glass, I saw a familiar figure. Alexei. He was thinner, a new scar on his face, an exhaustion in his eyes I had never seen. But he was alive, he had come back. I rushed to open the door and threw myself into his arms. He held me so tight as if to fuse me into his body. "You came back," I said through tears. "You really came back." "I promised." He kissed my hair, forehead, tears. "I promised." We stood like that in the winter night's cold wind, until the bodyguard coughed to remind us to go inside. Upstairs, I made him jasmine tea. His hand was wrapped in bandages. "What happened?" I held his hand. "Handling betrayal," he said lightly. "Found the mole, cleaned house, re-established rules. Dmitri fled to Chicago, but he won't be coming back." "Did you?" "No." He looked at me. "I remembered what you said. I didn't want you to look at a killer, so He paused. "Let him leave alive, but made sure he'll never dare come back." I felt relief. "So now what?" "Now." He set down the teacup, pulled a key from his pocket. "We go to Vienna." "What?" "I've cleaned everything up," he said, his eyes brighter than ever. "Transferred all the business to my deputy, made the transition, handled what needed handling. I'm free, Mira, for the first time. I'm truly free." He gripped my hand. "Come with me to Vienna, to my mother's house. There is a river there, sunlight, a piano that has been waiting 10 years. His voice trembled. "Our future." I looked at him, this man who had once been cold, lonely, who thought himself beyond saving. Now his eyes were full of hope. "Does the house have a study?" I asked, tears blurring my vision. He smiled, a real smile, like spring. "Yes, 2 stories, floor-to-ceiling windows. You can see the Danube. Then that is enough." He kissed me, in this bookstore that had witnessed all our suffering and hope. Outside it began to snow, the New Year's first snow, like a blessing from above. The Danube glittered gold in the morning sunlight. I stood on the balcony, coffee in hand, watching tour boats glide slowly past on the river. Behind me came the sound of piano, Schubert's Impromptu. Alexei was still practicing, starting precisely at 6 every morning. He said this was his redemption, using music to wash away the traces of the past. I turned and looked at him through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Sunlight fell on him, his fingers dancing fluently across the black and white keys. He wore a simple white shirt and jeans, his hair slightly messy, a focused smile on his lips. 6 months now. 6 months ago, we left New York with 2 suitcases. When the plane landed at Vienna airport, Alexei squeezed my hand and said a new beginning. His mother's house was on the city's edge, a 3-story building with white walls covered in climbing roses. The first floor was living room and kitchen, the second floor a study. Really 2 stories tall with bookshelves, the 3rd floor bedroom and music room. The backyard had a small garden planted with lavender and rosemary. The first month, Alexei barely dared touch the piano. He would stand in the music room doorway, looking at that black grand piano, his expression so complex it hurt to see. "The first piece she taught me was Farce Elise," he suddenly said one day. "I was 8. She said Beethoven wrote this piece full of love, so you have to play it with love." He smiled bitterly. "But later with these hands I did so much." "Then start over." I took his hand and led him to the piano. "Start with For Elise." He sat down, his fingers trembling as he pressed the first note. The tone was rusty, halting, but I saw tears in his eyes. From then on, he practiced every day, from Beethoven to Chopin, from Schubert to Debussy. Many mistakes, but improving each day. He said music was helping him recover his humanity. I also started a new life. In the 2nd month, I found an antique bookstore in the city. The owner was an 80-year-old woman who needed help. My German was still terrible, but books are a universal language. The old woman liked me, said I reminded her of herself when young. Every morning, Alexei practiced piano. I organized the bookstore. In the afternoon, we would walk together, along the Danube, feeding swans, watching street performers. In the evening, he would cook for me. He never went in the kitchen in New York, but now he was surprisingly good at it. Russian borscht, Austrian schnitzel, Italian pasta. He said his mother taught him. Those sealed memories were slowly thawing. In the 4th month, we went to Salzburg, Mozart's birthplace, the city of music. Alexei stood in Mirabelle Gardens, looking at the distant castle, and suddenly said, "I want to hold a concert." "What?" "A small one," he said, his eyes serious. "For my mother. She always wanted to see me perform, but I never gave her that chance. Now." He squeezed my hand. "Now I want to try." 2 months later, the concert came true. Not in a grand theater, but in our music room at home. Alexei invited neighbors, the old woman from the bookstore, friends we had made in Vienna, 20 people total. He sat at the piano and took a deep breath. "This concert is dedicated to my mother," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "and to the person who was willing to believe I could change." He looked at me, his eyes full of love. Then he began to play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, third movement, intense, passionate, full of emotion. His fingers danced across the keys. The entire room trembled. This wasn't a display of technique. This was an outpouring of soul. When the piece ended, everyone stood and applauded. I saw tear tracks on Alexei's face, but he was smiling. That evening, after the guests left, he held me on the balcony looking at stars. "You know," he said softly, "I had a dream." "What dream?" "I dreamed of my mother." His voice was light. She sat in the music room, listening to me play. After I finished, she said, "Well done, Alexei. I always knew you would come back." He squeezed my hand. Then she said, "Take good care of that girl. She saved you." I leaned on his shoulder, tears sliding down. She was right. "No." Alexei turned, cupping my face. "You saved me, Mira. In that bookstore, when I thought I was completely numb, you saw me, the real me." He pulled a small box from his pocket. My heart almost stopped beating. "I'm not good at romantic words," he said, opening the box. Inside was a simple silver ring. "I also don't have a perfect past to give you, but I can give you the future, every morning's piano music, every cup of jasmine tea, every walk along the Danube." He knelt on one knee. "Mira Chen, will you marry me? Let me spend the rest of my life proving that a person can change." I nodded through tears, unable to speak. He stood up, put the ring on my finger, and kissed me, kissing tenderly, deeply full of promise. "Come on, smile for the camera." I raised the camera. Alexei cooperatively smiled, though still a bit stiff. It was much more natural than a year ago. He sat at the piano, behind him the music room's floor-to-ceiling windows, the Danube sparkling in the sunlight. "Done?" he asked. "One more," I said, pressing the shutter. "The photo would go in my new book, A Record of a Love Story." Yes, I wrote a book about a bookstore owner and a lost soul, about Morandi paintings and jasmine tea, about how to find light in the darkest places. The German publisher loved it, said it would be published next month. Finished. Alexei came over, wrapping his arm around my waist. One last paragraph left. I leaned on his shoulder. The ending. Then right. He kissed my hair. They lived happily ever after. I laughed. Too cliché. "But true," he said, turning me to face him. "We really are happy, aren't we?" I looked at him, this man who had once been cold, lonely, who thought himself beyond saving. Now his eyes were full of tenderness. The scar on his face had faded, but it added a unique charm. His hands were no longer cold. When holding mine, they were warm and steady. "Very happy," I said. The doorbell rang. I went to answer it. It was the mailman with a package. From New York. Alexei opened it. Inside was a letter and some photos. The letter was from the new owner of my old bookstore. A young couple had taken it over and business was good. The photos showed it after renovation, new shelves, new lighting. But that spot by the window was still there, even with the same chair. "They kept your spot," I said, smiling. Alexei looked at the photos, his expression tender. "That is where we began." "Yes." He set down the photos and pulled me toward the balcony. Vienna's spring had arrived. Roses bloomed abundantly in the garden. The air carried a sweet fragrance. "You know what I'm thinking," he said. "What?" "If I hadn't walked into that bookstore that day," he looked into the distance. "If I had continued sinking in that world, where would I be now? Probably in prison," I half joked. "Or, no longer in this world," he finished. But his tone was calm. "But I did walk in. I saw you, saw Morandi, saw a different way of living." He turned to me, gripping my hand. "People say change is hard, say a leopard can't change its spots. But you know what? Change only needs one reason." He placed my hand on his heart. "And you are my reason." I stood on tiptoe and kissed him. Behind us came piano melody from the stereo. Alexei had set it up in advance. He took my hand and we began to dance. We spun on the balcony, clumsy but happy, the Danube flowing beside us, witnessing this impossible miracle. Mommy, Daddy played wrong again. 4-year-old Elena ran over laughing, throwing herself into my arms. She had Alexei's gray eyes, but when she smiled she looked like me. "Don't tattle." Alexei came out of the music room, pretending to be serious. "I played wrong on purpose, testing if you were listening carefully." "Liar," Elena giggled. "You just forgot that F sharp." I watched them interact, my heart full of warmth. 3 years ago, when Elena was born, Alexei cried all night, not from sadness but fear. He said he was afraid of becoming like his father, afraid his past would affect this pure life. But he was a perfect father, gentle, patient, wholehearted. He taught Elena piano, reading, art appreciation. He never mentioned his past, but with every action proved that a person can rewrite their own story. "All right," I said, "time for bed, little princess." "I want Daddy to tell a story," Elena protested. "Okay," Alexei picked her up, "but just one." I followed them upstairs, standing in the doorway listening. "Once upon a time there was a big bad wolf," Alexei began. "He was fierce and everyone was afraid of him. But one day he met a little rabbit." "The little rabbit wasn't afraid of him?" Elena asked. "No," Alexei said, his voice gentle, "because the little rabbit saw through his disguise, knew the big bad wolf was just lonely. So the little rabbit brought him carrots every day, talked with him, told him the world could be beautiful." "Then what?" "Then the big bad wolf didn't want to be a big bad wolf anymore," he said. "He wanted to become a rabbit, wanted to live in sunlight, wanted to have a home." "Did he succeed?" "He did," Alexei kissed her forehead, "because love can change everything." Elena closed her eyes contentedly. I walked in, and Alexei and I closed the light together. In the hallway, he suddenly hugged me. "Thank you," he whispered in my ear. "For what?" "Thank you for never giving up on me," he said. "Thank you for walking into my life that afternoon. Thank you for believing that a person with hands full of sin could still be redeemed." I looked up at him, moonlight streaming through the window onto his face. 5 years had passed. The scars had completely faded, but those eyes were brighter than before. "You know," I said, "I never saved you." "What do you mean?" "You saved yourself." He held his hand. "You made the choice, chose to walk into the bookstore, chose to seek peace, chose to believe that change was possible. I just happened to be there." "No," he insisted. "You were my light. At the end of the dark tunnel, you were that beam of light. Then let's illuminate each other." We embraced in the hallway. Downstairs, the piano in the music room stood silently, witnessing this family's happiness. Outside, Vienna's night was gentle and peaceful, the Danube glimmering silver in the moonlight. Some stories are destined to be told because they remind us that even in the darkest places, love can kindle hope. Even carrying the heaviest past, a person can still choose a new future. Even when the world says you're beyond saving, there is always someone willing to believe in miracles. And the most beautiful ending isn't fairy tale perfection, but two imperfect people choosing every day to wake up and continue loving each other. This is our story. A story about Morandi art books, jasmine tea, piano music, and endless possibilities. A story about redemption. A story about love. That corner of the bookstore still displays a Morandi art book to this day. The new owner says it is the treasure of the shop because it witnessed the beginning of a miracle. Every few years, a couple with a child comes back to visit. The man sits in that spot by the window. The woman makes him jasmine tea. They tell their child, "This is where we met." The child asks, "Then what?" They look at each other and smile, saying, "Then we lived happily ever after." Cliché, but true. And this is the best ending.